I'm Kristen Welker, moderator of Meet the Press, and today we're talking about news interviews. How will this impact the campaign more broadly? Do you bear responsibility for what is happening at the border? Do you believe this judge should be impeached, Senator? There are a few key goals with every journalistic interview. First, to make sure that the person you're interviewing gets to express their perspective and their opinion. I try to never interrupt the person I'm interviewing. You want to let everyone get out their perspective. Make sure that you are asking them challenging questions, holding them to account for their words, for their actions. Part of that requires going back in time, looking at their past statements, looking at their past interviews to make sure that you're holding them to account, not just for what they said this week, but what they may have said several years ago. You want to make sure you are educating the public. You hope that the viewer, that your reader, that your listener comes away from every interview with new and important information. Let's do it at the end of this section and then go to Doge. Let's flip it. When I'm preparing for an interview, I absolutely try to commit as much to memory as possible. I also have written notes in front of me. I also take notes throughout the course of the interview. One of the key goals of every interview is to listen. If I've read enough, if I've researched enough, hopefully I'm nimble enough to ask a follow-up question to elicit the type of information or answer that will be valuable to our viewers. It is okay to look down at your notes. I do it all of the time. It's important that you are precise in your words in these interviews because so much is riding on them. And quite frankly, there's no room for error. Welcome to Meet the Press.
Kristen, good to see you.
When people come on Meet the Press, they know that it's going to be the most challenging interview they could possibly have, and fair. Why are all of those folks wrong and President Trump is right about his tariff policy? The way to make sure that you start off on the right foot with people is it's okay to go a little bit big picture at first, to let the person say what they want to say, give their perspective. What does this person want to talk about?
And I wrote this book. Can I explain a minute why I wrote this book?
Please.
I felt I had to do something.
Give them space to talk about their viewpoint on an issue that they really care about. And then we shift into what are some challenging questions. I try not to ever ask quote unquote gotcha questions. And what I mean by that is I try to ask questions that the person I'm interviewing can answer, is equipped to answer, has the expertise to answer. What was your message to President Zelensky? And is this aid getting there too late to make a difference? I try to make these open-ended questions. I try not to ask yes or no questions, but I really try to give people the space and the breadth to give their perspective. I think if you're viewing every question through that lens, you're going to cut down on that notion of whatever someone might consider to be a quote-unquote gotcha question. I know you've been asked this before, but do you still rule out a run in 2024?
You gotta be kidding.
Sometimes it's very challenging to get people to answer your question directly. If someone didn't answer my question, I repeat the question. I make it very clear, hey, I didn't hear an answer to my question. Let me try that again. If they still don't answer, I might reframe the question. I might ask a follow-up question that gets at a slightly different angle of a similar theme. But that really is the crux of what we do as journalists and as political journalists, to try to drill down on and get as close as possible to an earnest answer from whomever we're interviewing. The best advice I ever received on interviewing is that interviewing is not about talking, it's not about asking, it's about listening. And if you are armed with the facts, with a good set of questions and follow-up questions, when you hear something really significant, you're present and you're in the moment and ready to follow up. I welcome you to the final 2020 presidential debate. When I moderated the debate in 2020, I went onto the stage that night and said to myself, just listen, listen, listen. And that's what I did. And that gave me the authority to know when I needed to follow up and when I needed to move on. All right, gentlemen, we're going to move on. I'm going to give you 30 seconds to respond, and then we're going to move on. All right, Vice President Biden, and then we're going to move on to the next section. My advice to people who are starting their careers, get that first job, say yes, learn as much as you can, raise your hand, My first job on air was in Redding, California, about 5 hours north of San Francisco.
Good news this evening, firefighters are gaining ground on the 330-acre fire near Hayfork.
I did all my own camera work. I carried a tripod around. I was the weekend anchor. I wrote the whole show. I physically edited the whole show. I operated the teleprompter with my foot. I even did the weather. And it was one of the best experiences of my life because I learned so much about how broadcast news works. So as you're starting out your career, be open, be willing to raise your hand and try something new. It might not be your dream job yet, but if you pursue your goal with passion, you will get there.